Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakallah for coming back to our session today. We've just finished a session on fiqh, and now we're doing a very important lesson on SEN, so special educational needs, and also how to consider their needs when it comes to post-lockdown, but also whilst lockdown is easing in our country. And again, it may be so that certain parts of England, the lockdown is still on. So you can still ask questions if you're in those areas. However, we will be talking about how this whole communication goes in terms of special educational needs after lockdown. So we have some guests with us today as well, alhamdulillah. We also have Ustadh Danyaal with us, who is our Senko, and he will be hosting today's session. So we have Sister Zainab with us, we have Ustadha Nabeela with us, and we have Ustadh Danyaal. Inshallah, I'll pass it on to Ustadh Danyaal, where he will, inshallah, introduce our guests, and he will also be hosting the session. Alongside hosting the session, just something that we're going to do slightly differently, and you may be seeing it scroll along the bottom of the screen, is that we're not going to be taking questions throughout the session. However, we would like you to type them up, either if you're here via YouTube or if you're here via Facebook. Do type them up on whichever platform you're on, and we will have a Q&A session right at the end of today's session. It's just that we want to keep focus on the structure of the lesson today, and thereafter we will have a Q&A right at the end, and we will have a part 2 to this, inshallah, the following Monday, but you will get more details of that closer to the time, inshallah. So over to you, Ustadh Danyaal, if you unmute your mic, and you can take it from there.
Jazakallah khair, Sheikh. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone. Jazakallah khair for tuning in today for this very important session on SEN strategies and post-lockdown. So alhamdulillah, a few weeks ago, I was invited by UKIM and Masjid Ibrahim to talk about strategies post-lockdown. So what we've decided to do today is invite Sister Zainab and Ustadha Nabeela to come on, essentially do a sort of a recap of the session that they did last time, and again to provide a bit of Q&A for the parents post-session as well. So I'll just introduce our speakers. So alhamdulillah, we have Ustadha Nabeela. She works in a primary school as a learning support assistant for SEN pupils and interventions. She's also the project coordinator at Masjid Ibrahim UKIM for the Autism project, and involved with community development projects. She's also a graduate from Madrasa Zahra, so she's an alima as well, mashallah. Also with her, we have Sister Zainab, who is a school-based speech and language therapist, just like myself. And she's a group lead for the Autism project for Masjid Ibrahim UKIM. So jazakallah khair to both of you for coming on today and giving up your time for us. I'll hand over to you, and I'll be making notes of the questions. Just as Maulana Hamid said earlier, I'll be making notes of the questions, and after the presentation, we can look at answering the questions, inshallah. Okay, over to you, inshallah.
Jazakallahu khairan, Brother Danyaal. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, everyone. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. Rabbi zidni ilma. I pray and hope that you all are doing well, inshallah, and everyone's safe. So today we are going, as Ustadh Danyaal said, that we're going to be talking about SEN and post-lockdown. Just very recently, we did a program with UKIM, Masjid Ibrahim, in regards to pre-lockdown, during lockdown, some of the strategies and communication strategies on how parents could sort of cope during that time. So today we are going to be focusing on a similar aspect of lockdown, but inshallah moving forward from there. So some of the things that we will cover today, inshallah, is the introduction, the challenges during lockdown, transition after lockdown, some strategies to support families, and inshallah then the conclusion and the closing remarks. I will be in conversation with Sister Zainab, and we are going to split the session in half. So I'm going to introduce it, and Sister Zainab will take you on through the strategies of this session, inshallah. So like I was saying, so previously we've covered this topic regarding lockdown experiences and some of the challenges that was faced both by parents and the SEN children. So if you would like a recap on that topic, please feel free to email me and I will send you the link to the video, inshallah. But for today, we are going to recap on key points. And so this seminar is now going to be moving forward from lockdown, and we'll be focusing more towards transition and what transition will be looking like for us as well. So we've got some objectives for today that we want to focus on, and keep that quite concrete, inshallah. So our objectives for today is that we need to be able to really understand and empathize with the upcoming challenges of our SEN families and children post-lockdown. Obviously, the families a lot of SEN families have faced a lot of challenges during lockdown because of the lack of access to certain platforms, as well as just sort of not understanding what was happening at that time, and because things were not very clear. Our second objective is to start thinking about strategies to support transition and the new norm. With the government guidelines, everything keeps changing, quite frequently, probably weekly, sometimes even hourly. So we need to think about concrete strategies that we can sort of use regardless of what the government guidelines are saying, so that they are sort of applicable to various situations. And lastly, to create a safe space and a platform for families to connect and express ideas and concerns, inshallah. So this is a safe space. This is a place where we can, openly ask questions and sort of talk about our challenges and certain issues and changes that we might be going through during this lockdown period, inshallah. And just as a disclaimer, I said this in my previous seminar as well, that if you have met one person with special educational needs, you have honestly just met one person with special educational needs. We cannot generalize, emotions or behavior patterns across sort of SEN spectrum. However, we can sort of take common factors and sort of use that to sort of reach out to you all and to try and see what sort of works best for our families or for our children, and and take it on from there, inshallah. So like I said, in the previous seminar, we spoke about challenges, so what was life like before lockdown? So life before lockdown was obviously, we had a normal routine. Everybody was in a routine. Everyone was following a certain way of life, and, and going on and keeping up with their day-to-day activity. However, then lockdown happened, COVID happened. And during lockdown, we were facing new challenges. We were facing new issues, because we had restricted access to a lot of things. So what did challenges during lockdown look like? Sorry, can you move on to the next, the third, sorry, the one after that as well. Thank you, that's it. Sorry, before that, which is supposed to say challenges during lockdown? Yeah, that's it. So what did challenges during lockdown look like? So before, obviously before lockdown, our children were going to school. They had a certain mode of transport they took, whether it was by going by car or walking or cycling or going by a school bus. They had certain experiences, which was their sensory experiences. They had a certain type of school timetable to follow. They had similar faces that they were seeing every single time. However, during lockdown, all of this changed because a lot of the schools shut down across the country. There was a lot of the access was given to sort of the key worker children, so children who belong to key workers, and for them, and especially if they were SEN, that posed a bigger challenge for the children, because transport had changed, because so for example, for a certain time, you couldn't use the buses or the trains, or so the children had to sort of resort to using a different form of transport, for example, going by car. Sensory experiences. When the school shut down, obviously all the children were at home, and for those children who were attending school, there was not the hustle and bustle in the classrooms. There was not the hustle and bustle in the corridors, or hearing children sort of talking or playing, or children playing in the playground. There was a different experience. So there was a one-way system now entering into school. The school was not as crowded as anymore. And because staffing was affected, because some staff were now shielding, or some staff couldn't come into school because they were not well. So because of that, timetables changed. So children were not doing the usual activities that they would do in on a normal school day. So these were a lot of the challenges that was posed during lockdown for the children who were attending school. However, even for those children who were at home, SEN children who were at home, even for them, sensory experiences were very limited. So now they had to sort of make do with what was available at home. Timetables changed, routine changed. So sleeping patterns changed, because we were not because we were not going out much, not burning enough energy. That sort of had an effect in terms of our sleeping pattern, our behavioral patterns. waking up late, doing work late, staying in a certain type of clothing, for example, you may be staying in your pajamas all day. So there were all of these challenges around for our SEN children. Like, so no sensory, limited sensory experience, a different form of a timetable. So especially if you're at home, there's a different timetable. There's a different kind of timetable that you need to adapt to when you're at school as well. And then there was diet changes. So if they were going to school, there was now a limited choice in terms of what food was available at school, because there was less children, there was less to make. And then at home, then, again, it's a different form of diet that you're following at home. So all of this was affecting our SEN children, because that's too much change. That's too many changes that's been happening in a very short period of time. So now that they're adapting to these changes, and then suddenly, now that routine is going to change again, very soon, because now we've been asked to come back to school. So, Sister Zainab, would you like to fill up on some of the sensory experiences as well?
Yeah, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So just like Sister Nabeela said, I think the main point of this slide, and it's something that we've talked about in a lot more detail in the previous webinar, which you can access, is just highlighting how meaningful these things are for our children with special educational needs. So all these points that have been raised, that particular school bus that our child looks forward to using on the way to school, and that drives them to get to their next part of their transition, or we were talking about the sensory experiences. I'll talk about that a little bit more. So an example being, we come from the Autism project, and for some of our children that we work with, we understand that they really do need highly visual stimuli, or maybe smell or taste or sound to keep them regulated. And these things are different now during lockdown. They might be a lot more, it might be a lot more of a quiet environment, because it's a lot more confined, and there's less mixing about in the playground, for example. So a lot of things that are very meaningful to our children have now changed. And the reason we've thought it was important to talk about this is just to highlight, this is a huge thing for a lot of our children, and even for us as adults, when our routine shifts, we know during this period how it's made us feel. So again, that's why we've just highlighted it, and why it's so important that we help support the transition and smooth running back into the new norm by having a grasp on just how much it's affected our children, if you like.
Jazakallahu khairan. Yes, and then now moving on from the challenges, could you move on to the next slide, please? Thank you. So moving on from the challenges, obviously the lockdown posed a different kind of challenge, a different kinds of issues. Now that we're moving away from there and moving towards transition is now, we've sort of adapted to a new form of living, or a new form of systems and rules, and now we're trying to head towards a new normality. So what does this normality look like for us right now? Can you move on to the next point, please? Okay, so thank you. So as the months have passed, there's new systems, new routines that's been put into place. So now, what are these new routines and systems? There are routines in regards to your hygiene, and a regulation in our SEN children. So if you're looking at routine, what is the routine like for everyone right now? Constant hand washing, sanitizing. There's one-way systems that have been placed, whether it may be in a school setting, whether it may be in an office or a masjid, or anywhere that you go, there's a one-way system. Social distancing has now become one of the rules that we all follow. So making sure that we're not sort of, getting too close to someone. Before it was 2 meters, now it's like, less than 2 meters, but nevertheless, you're still social distancing. We've been at schools, we've been placed into bubbles. So children are now, either you're in a bubble of 7 children per class or 15 children per class, and then come September, it's going to look even more different. So they're saying that from September onwards, it might be a whole year group that might be a bubble. So all of these things, all of these changes are actually happening. But this might be posing a lot of confusion and anxiety within SEN children, because they've been learning something for the last 5 months, trying to adapt to a routine, during lockdown. And now that they're coming out of lockdown, now that lockdown is over, not that it is over, but now that they are coming to a sort of transition moving forward, it's a lot for them to take in, because they've just sort of grasped the idea of sort of hygiene, grasped the idea of sort of social distancing or one-way system, and now that they're going to be put into bubbles, but now bigger bubbles, and then but however they're still not there's still restrictions to communal spaces, so still not access to playgrounds. Even if you're in the playground, for example, you in the school that I'm working in, I've been working here since June. So since June, when schools opened, when they reopened, when I went back, so in the playground, children were not allowed to sort of play games where they might touch each other. For example, tag. They were not allowed to play football. They were not allowed to play basketball, because that's, you're touching the same thing, or you're touching the same sports object. Children but they had to think of games which dealt with sort of social distancing, and they were still following and adhering to the rules. And obviously this was posed really challenging to SEN children. So since I've, like I said, since I've started work, a lot of the concerns that I had with the SEN children and families when they came and they spoke to me was about this whole issue that there's a bubble system, and I feel like my child does not feel comfortable, that they are not they're not getting the same sensory experience, or that they can't attend their therapy, they don't have access to the usual games that they used to play, or the usual activities that they used to do. So a lot of this has actually changed. So there's still obviously a lot of uncertainty in the air, therefore there's going to be a lot of changes that's still yet to happen. So transition is, I would not say that transition is steady right now. We're still adapting to it. We're still trying to find our ground in terms of where we sort of stand during coming out of lockdown soon, and sort of what schools are going to look like. So I'm going to now pass it over to Sister Zainab, and she's now going to go through strategies in terms of how to now deal with transition and for our children. So starting at home, and then hopefully when they return back to school, what will that look like for them? Inshallah, that they will be more prepped. Inshallah. Jazakallahu khairan.
Jazakallahu khairan, Sister Nabeela. Okay, yeah. So just before I even begin my little segment, a little disclaimer that due to the limited time we have this evening, I'll be planting the seed of some strategies and giving you enough information to inshallah go and then do some more research into certain things. And I'll also signpost you at the end of my little part to people that you can contact or other resources to try and get further information. So there's 3 things that I'm going to touch on today. And they are the PALM approach. So I will talk about what that stands for, and some people may have heard of it and some haven't. That's absolutely fine. It will be a very short whistle-stop tour, but a very powerful tool that we've seen with our families work a treat. And then we're going to talk very briefly about social stories. I won't be talking about particular social stories. I'll be talking about what they are and how to make sure that we're using the appropriate sort of social story for our children based on their language and communication needs. And then finally, I'll be highlighting a little bit about the use of visuals, and then inshallah Brother Danyaal will continue that in his part of the strategies section. Can we go to the next slide, please? Okay, so first I'm going to talk about PALM. So the PALM approach. So before I even talk about what it stands for, just so you know, it's a technique that we use when, I'll use the word regulation, and I know that applies more to autistic children, but it can apply to any form of SEN, so any form of special educational needs. But the whole concept of it is you use it when a child is, or an individual is very dysregulated, so very overwhelmed by what's going on around them. And if you try and relate that to yourselves, maybe think of a situation where you're so overwhelmed that words fail you and language isn't the forefront, if you like. And this is where we need to use these sorts of strategies to try and get through to our children and help regulate them and calm them down and attune with them so that they feel safe and they feel understood, and we in the moment teach them how to effectively communicate instead of displaying whatever it is they're displaying outwardly. So it's more of an immediate strategy when all the other visuals and language and talking to the child isn't going to work because they're way too fired up. And we're using this because if you think about transitions, immediate transitions that are going to come up soon, there's going to be a lot of change, and this might lead to panic and a lot of high levels of dysregulation. So PALM, so the P stands for, if you think of it as your palm, your hand palm, the P stands for pause. So pause and panic quietly. It just means that when you, for example, are seeing a child who is dysregulated, overwhelmed, I'll give you a visual example. Maybe they're flapping their arms, they might be hitting themselves, they might be crying hysterically. We'll just go with that for now. Or they might be laughing hysterically, but they're out of the point of being able to just talk them down to being calm again. We need to pause. That's the first thing we need to do. We need to pause and just take that moment of pause as an opportunity to try and figure out what's going on. And yeah, panic quietly a little bit, because it is going to be most likely a little bit overwhelming for us as well to witness. So pause, and then we're going to attune. That means that we're going to kind of analyze, why is the child doing this? What are they trying to communicate? So if the child, for example, is hitting somebody every time they see them in the corridor, and we've paused now, we've taken a step back, we've tried to process what's happening. Now we're thinking, what are they trying to communicate? What is it that they're trying to say or express? Because we believe, our stance as speech therapists is everything's a form of communication. No matter what a person does, it could be verbal or non-verbal, they are trying to communicate something. And I think having that little take-home message in your mind is really powerful. So when you see behavior, you're not necessarily attributing it to misbehaving, you're seeing it as a way of communication. Yes, it might not be socially appropriate, but that's where we come in as communication partners to try and support and model appropriate responses. So yeah, we're going to attune and analyze, and then we're going to label. So this means, okay, now we've attuned with them and we're mirroring them. We're starting to use the same intonation, the same voice tone, the same volume as them where appropriate. Maybe they're flapping their arms and we're also mirroring them and flapping our arms with them. We're doing it to show them that we get it, we're on their level. And now we're going to label. So now we've figured out, okay, I think that this child is trying to say hello, or is trying to say, I need a break. We label that language. So we can do this through verbally saying, need a break, or hello, or whatever it is we think they're trying to communicate. But I would also layer that with a visual support, because like I said, in these sorts of situations, language may not be the thing that is receptive to that child. So by putting a visual, it might be the visual that gets through to them. So things like emotions key rings, and little visuals that child probably already has that works for them. This is where you'd use it to label and kind of help them make sense of how they're feeling. And then finally, model. So model means that we show them, we've attuned with them, we've showed them we've understood, we've tried to verbalize and visualize what's going on. Now we're going to model a more appropriate, socially appropriate way of dealing with that feeling. So for example, let's take the example of the child pushing everyone he sees in the corridor or she sees in the corridor, and we've said maybe they're trying to greet, it could be they're trying to say hello, but they're so overwhelmed and excited. We could now model, okay, let's say hello, and we can wave beside them to show them the right way of doing it, and then hopefully the other person, the recipient, will also respond, and that will be a reinforcer of how to appropriately model that behavior, and in turn they see the outcome and then will also follow that behavior, if that makes sense. Again, layer it with visuals, use total communication approach. So that picture on that PowerPoint, that long rectangle, is an example of an emotions keyring, but a bit more advanced. So it's saying in that one, when I'm angry, I can, and it's got different options so that the child can potentially choose something, and that suits their needs in that time. And it might, and hopefully as time goes on, you can create these in a way where they're very specific to that child. So maybe a child that's sad needs to listen to a specific ayah or a specific surah for them to calm down. So you can put that as an option once you know the child. Okay, so that's palm. And I think the most important thing with this that we've learned from our autism project parents is to just keep going with it, and it will feel very clunky to start with, but the more you do it and the more exposure that child has to the L and the M, the more opportunity they have to learn the right or the most appropriate way. Okay, just going to go on to the next one really quickly. So social stories. I'm not going to talk about what they are. I'm not going to talk about particular social stories per se, but I'll talk about why we use them. So social stories are used explicitly. So we use them as a very visual and explicit way to teach about social situations. And in the story, we will basically teach the child about a specific scenario and how we can problem solve the scenario in the story. So it's very meaningful to the child, and it gives them a very clear and concrete way of learning before they're thrown into a situation and they have to just respond. It's visual and it's meaningful, and social stories tend to be personalized to the child's need. So for example, we would use them to prepare our children for upcoming things that we think might actually make them feel uneasy or anxious, or they might become dysregulated. So in the past, I've used social stories for upcoming school trips, because we know that sometimes children can get very excited. So we'll make the story about that particular child. We'll use their name. We'll say they go to their school, and then we'd say, we're going on a school trip, and if we feel like this, here's how we can respond to it. Social stories are great for the upcoming transition because you can use it as part of a routine. So every morning or every evening before bed, you can read the social story with your child as part of their routine, and hopefully the more learning opportunity, the more chances they have to learn how to respond, because they've got that knowledge that we've been feeding into them whilst they're in a state of calm and they're ready to absorb. Social stories are effective when you read them and the child's able to sit and listen and really process the whole story, if you like. Something I want to make, I'm sure many families and staff members are aware of them, but something I see quite a lot is we tend to pluck social stories online, which is fine, but we need to make sure that they're very matched up to the language level of our child. So if the child is on a 2 to 3 word language level, so they're communicating using 2 to 3 word phrases, we need to make sure we're picking language that matches that. There's no point in giving them essays of words to read or to listen to if they can't produce that. So it's already an indicator of what the capacity of understanding may be. And in a time where you're using social stories, you want to make sure it's as accessible as possible. We're not there to test them in that moment. So if a child's non-verbal, we might use pictures with like single words, the keywords, and maybe use some gesture or actual role play as a way of teaching as well. So I guess the key point here is to make sure you're using the right language match. Remember that it's a very good preparation tool that you can have at hand, and there's a lot of resources out there. So I would strongly recommend that. It's something we've been using as well, and we've been creating for this transition back into the new norm. If we go to the next slide, I'm just going to quickly show you an example I found offline very quickly. This is an example. I think it's a Widget Online. That's the resource, the website, and they have quite a whole bank of social stories, and you can pick the language level you like. So this is one about going back to school. I just wanted to show anyone who's not seen one before what they look like. So they vary in how they look. When I make them very, very visual and try and make them look as realistic to the child's environment as possible. But this is one very simple language, very simple symbols, so it's not taking away from the key message. And if you can see, the points that are being raised in the story are things like, I'm going back to school, my school has been closed because of coronavirus, and the pictures are on the bits that are key. It's safe to go back to school, and that's just a snippet, but that's just an example, if you like. So that's social stories. And then final slide before the end is visuals. So I will be talking about the whole concept of visuals, and then inshallah brother Danyaal will be picking up with a whole bank of strategies that I think he's prepared. So with visuals, I've put a symbol of like 2 speech bubbles. So the reason I put that there is, before we even think about our children, I want it to relate to us, so we really understand the power of visuals, because I feel like sometimes it can be negatively perceived, adding loads of pictures and visuals to a child's learning, because we feel like we're babying it down too much. But in a time like transition, where they need to feel like the learning process and all the access to information is as easy to understand as possible, visuals are very important. So the analogy that I tend to use with parents and families is, think about you going to a country where you don't speak the language at all. So for example, we're going to Japan and we don't speak Japanese, and we really, really need the toilet, or we really, really need the prayer room. something we really, really need, but we can't communicate in the language because we just don't have the language skills. And also the language itself, the way it's written is very abstract for us. We can't even wing it. We are going to depend on symbols for toilets, and we are going to depend on symbols for us around to navigate. And in times where there's high levels of anxiety and transition and change, I guess this is where we need to make it as easy as possible for our children. We're not there to test them. It's not a test. We're there to scaffold and make it as smooth as possible, if you like. And the other analogy I'd like to really quickly use is, if you think about when you use your mobile phone and you unlock your phone and you very quickly swipe onto your main menu and you look for WhatsApp or you look for Hotmail or whatever it is, the chances are you're not reading the words. You're not reading the words underneath the app. You're looking at the symbols. That is your navigation tool. So if you think about how much we do that, and now think about how meaningful it must be for our children. So that's why that's like my introduction, if you like, to visuals. And I've popped some example child. So if a child's nonverbal or they're not able to process drawings, then use a photo or use an object. Use something more meaningful to the child. Or I'm going to the sensory space because I'm holding something flashing. So some children are on that level. Sometimes children are able to use a picture. So a picture of a banana instead of having to hold and smell and taste the banana. So use what your language level is for your child. And I don't think it's wrong personally to always add more visuals where you can. If you think about today's presentation, it would have been very boring if we didn't throw all these visuals in to illustrate our points. And I've just put an example at the bottom where you can see the sock. So these are a range of visuals, so objects attached to pictures. And I'm not expecting parents and families to know exactly what's going to work per se for their child. But you'll have an idea, and that's where other people are there as well, like speech therapists and schools and teachers who have a few extra ideas in the bag, if you like. And I'd also very strongly recommend during this transition period the use of visual timetables and now and next boards. So visual timetables are what you can see on the far right going vertically, and it basically has a visual representation of what that child's going to expect in that day. And you can keep it a whole day, or you can do it up until playtime and then refresh it with the next load of symbols. That's fine. It's down to your child's capacity. But by having that and moving those pictures, that child knows what's coming. You've already reduced that panic, if you like. And the now and next board, you can pluck the pictures off the timetable and put it onto the now and next board. And then that's an even more honed in way of helping them stay on task and transitioning smoothly, because they know now I have to do this and next I'm doing this. The idea is that it will reduce the anxiety, reduce the panic. They know where they need to be next. So then they can transition a lot more smoothly without as much dysregulation, if you like. So right before I finish my bit, I'm just gonna go to the final point. So yeah, we put this in our seminar last time, and I think parents really appreciated it, and families and carers and schools. So if you feel like after today, throughout the whole session, you want more information, or you don't know how to source correct information, because there's a lot out there on Google, then I would strongly recommend speaking to the school's SENCO, so Special Educational Needs Coordinator. So Brother Danyaal would be the person for Fatima Elizabeth. Speak to the school. So even if you're talking to the teacher, they can then signpost you to the relevant person. Speak to, if your child's known to speech and language therapy or any of the therapies, I would contact either them directly or contact the NHS centre and just ask for advice. There's loads of resources out there. For our autism project, we signposted to the National Autistic Society for further resources. There's some really good stuff on there, and also the information's quite reliable. It's a good source. And there's other ones like MenCap for special educational needs. There's loads of really reputable resources. And finally, there are some really good forums that are popping up, but just be very mindful and maybe cross-check before accessing everything online, because sometimes things can be not so productive. But other than that, Jazakallah khair, that's me done.
Okay, Jazakallah khair to Sister Zainab and Ustadha Nabeela for that very informative session. show plenty of strategies, techniques there to really think about and to go forward with. So we've got a couple of questions here with regards to the webinar that we had. So with regards to the Palm approach, these are sort of linked together really. Can you tell us more about Palm with regards to the label? Where can local maktabs get these from? Sort of linked to that, can we get the exact link for the social stories widget online? How can madrasas use visuals? What type of visuals could they use, and anywhere online where they can print it from? So I'll let Sister Zainab or Ustadh Nabeela to answer that first.
Yeah, so I can't see the comments, but if you just, could you repeat the first one for me, please?
So with regards to label, can you tell us more about this under Palm, and where can local maktabs get this from? So obviously it's using visuals, isn't it?
Can you see the question on the screen now?
I can see it now. Yeah, I can see it
Yeah,
now.
so if you just read that, and then after you've read it, if you can just answer it, that would be helpful, inshallah.
So with Palm, when you Google the word Palm, you'll get very odd results. But if you actually type in like pause, attune, label and model, then you will find a couple of NHS like PowerPoints from all over the country, and they're very good at giving you examples. But labeling, that part of it is, if you think of it as this is your opportunity as the adult, as the communication partner, to give them understanding of what they're feeling. So you're labeling it, you're kind of validating what you think they're feeling. And just be mindful, we might not always get it right. So we might think they're hungry when they are grinding their teeth, but maybe they're just feeling tired. But that's okay, because you'll get feedback. But when you start to model, okay, let's go and eat something, and that response is, no, I don't want that, then we can go back to L and try and think about labeling it differently. I hope that helps.
So I guess that sort of links in quite nicely. So how can madrasas use visuals? What type of visuals could they use, and online where they could be printed from?
How can madrasas use visuals? What type of visuals? So I think there is a database upcoming where some of the madrasas are actually collectively in this past year, mashallah tabarakallah, they're trying to put everything in one place so you can access resources. I know for Masjid Ibrahim, we are starting to think about, during this little period of time where we can, making some colourful semantics resources and Islamically friendly visuals. I've actually found Twinkle to be quite handy over lockdown. I would check out Twinkle. So TW.
And it's still free as well at the moment, isn't it?
Is it? I don't know, but they have like cooking resources. What other resources? I would also say contact your local speech therapy, like NHS service, and see if you can get like a template of now and next boards and things like that. You can get them on Twinkle as well.
Perfect. Can we get the exact link for social stories or widget online?
If I send that to you guys, like, and then if you can then disseminate it afterwards.
Yeah, that would be fine. We've got another question come through. In relation to social stories, there's one specific resource on our website which is available for free. 11 social stories and available for Muslim children with autism spectrum disorder. So it's Islamic Studies resource website. So jazakallah khair for that. I much appreciated. It's fantastic.
So Ustadh Danyaal, I have something to just mention. It's a question as well, maybe a point of discussion.
Comment, yeah.
So similar to how a lot of the children, especially with special needs, and even children in general, but more so special needs, you know, we have schools where they have special needs departments. We have schools where they have, SENCO, special educational needs coordinators. Now, in terms of mosques, I kind of feel that when it comes to easing of lockdown and madrasas reopening again, I don't know how much mosques are focusing on children with special needs, or are they just focusing on the social distancing aspect just to kind of, fulfill the policy? So just to make sure that they're at a distance and all of that, are they actually thinking about children with special needs and all of these things that we're speaking about now? So that's the first thing. And how can we get mosques to think about this and put this on the agenda so that, students who are coming back, how they can feel more comfortable coming back to madrasa as they would to school because schools have facilitated them and they have the facilities. And the second point was, in terms of every mosque, and by mosque I'm talking about every maktab or madrasa or after school Islamic studies lessons that take place in the mosques, they need to think about having special educational needs coordinators at the madrasas. Now, one of the ways that for example, with Ustadh Danyaal, yourself, you're professionally qualified as a Senko, and
as a speech therapist.
As a speech therapist, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm relying on Senko.
Yeah, so you're specifically specialized in that, but you still have more, good understanding of the broader points as well. So maybe every mosque needs to think about, in every community there definitely will be at least one Senko who works professionally at a school, who could then, as he or she could then offer their services however they like to the local mosques or to the local maktabs. Maybe not every single day, maybe every other day, whatever. Do you think mosques should go into that, and how can we kind of bring this into the mosques to bring that kind of social change for the children? So those two questions, and that's for everyone to kind of discuss.
I think personally, they should. I completely agree with what you're saying, Sheikh Hamid. And I think we should sort of branch out to masajids across the UK, and speak about special educational needs, because I feel there's not much of an awareness within within maktab settings and things like that. And usually when we do Islamic studies, we sort of just focus on the mainstream children and sort of their academic learning, when obviously SEN children are as equally important. I think it should start with sort of like a raising awareness, reaching out in terms of seminars, and sort of making your way in that way, so that you can sort of go and help, even sort of allowing masjids to sort of help make guidelines for SEN children to sort of make their way into the masjid as well. Like right now with Masjid Ibrahim, when I was speaking to the head of the committee, I spoke to them that I would like to be on the table when you're making guidelines for the children coming back into the masjid, because we have a whole department for SEN, and we would really want that these children also feel very comfortable when they're coming in. So I think it's sort of that sort of a voice coming through, where you need to sort of take a stand, whatever masjid you go to, and wherever maktabs take place, or madrasas or Islamic classes take place for children. I think you should, even if parents can get involved in sort of planning out the guidelines, and sort of making masajids and maktabs sort of aware of their children's needs as well.
Absolutely, jazakallah for that. I think what the key thing that you mentioned was that if, because for example, those people who are aware of this, they may not have that reach to all the maktabs and madrasas, but in regards to parents, and parents especially with special needs, we need to approach the masajid. They are ultimately charities, and they are there to serve the community, and we need to understand that. However, we need to know the best way to approach them as well. So I think that's definitely key, and it's ultimately our future, and the future of Islam in Britain, and future of all Muslims in Britain. And every single child matters, regardless of their, whatever. Every single child matters in the true sense, not just in the tick box exercise, but in the true sense. And this is what Prophet ﷺ has taught us. So definitely, jazakallah for that, Ustadha Nabeela. Parents, if you're listening to this, please do not just give up. Please do go and push this to committees of mosques, push this to the head teachers of the local maktabs, to get in there Senko, and maybe a very small special needs department, or just at least a Senko to start with, who will know better, because they're already doing it in their professional capacity.
Sheikh, just to intervene on that, I think even at a more basic level, just having sort of basic SEN awareness would go a long way, because I would imagine a lot of people working in masajids and maktabs would not necessarily have that basic knowledge about what SEN is or what SEN are. We co-hosted some training for was it Wolfham WFCOM, yeah, a few months back. And again, it sort of opens your eyes in terms of what needs to be done from a very basic level, even before getting Senkos in, which of course is very, very important. Jackie, you just reminded me of important point actually. how masajids have opened up now, there's a new routine. So for our masjid in Chingad, for example, you have to have three things. You have to have your mask with you, you have to have your shoe bag, you have to have your prayer mat with you. So even for ourselves, we have to get used to this new routine of being in the masjid in this way, separate entrances, etc. So that point about getting our kids ready to come back to the masjid as well it's really, really important. I was in the masjid the other day, and a lot of people complain about having to wear a mask because they're not used to it. It's very, very uncomfortable. And you can imagine for a child with sensory needs, who might find it really, really uncomfortable to have a mask on. And that sort of thing, perhaps there could be some level of leniency for these individuals. And I believe legally there is, because there is a medical matter there, for people with autism to have some leniency when it comes to following these rules. I just want to put that in, Sheikh.
No, Jazakallah. Before we move on, I just want to put up on the screen what Sister Zainab has just sent us. So it's also available now on the comment section for Facebook and also YouTube. The direct link for widget.com /COVID19.htm. I'll also put that on the comments for after the live session finishes. So you will have this in the comment section. Please look down there and you can just click on that. And also I think there's another one for there's another link here for social stories that we asked for. So that's there as well. So inshallah, when Ustadh Danyaal starts speaking, I'll also put that up for parents who need to use this, or even local madrasas and maktabs who need to use this. Alongside that, I think Islamic Studies Resources website are also here as well. So maybe if you want to take those links down to put up on your Islamic Studies website, because these are equally relevant for you guys as well. So that would be helpful. Can I just put up the question that's which Ustadh Danyaal spoke about, which I couldn't put up earlier because there's a bit of lag. In relation to social stories, there is one specific resource on our website, which is Islamic Studies Resources, which is available for free. 11 social stories in adab for Muslim children with autism spectrum disorder. So if I can request admin of Islamic Studies Resources website, if you can maybe send us the link for your website, but also specifically this particular page of your website that you are referring to, so we can also have that there ready to go for parents as well. What I will do, I'll put all these links under the description, so everyone will have access to this, inshallah. So don't worry, you don't need to take note of it. It will be available. Back over to you, Ustadh Danyaal, whilst I get that done.
Perfect. Of course, but the whole point of this session as well was to have some more comments and questions coming from parents. So we do encourage our parents to come in with any comments or queries whilst we have our esteemed guests here with us at the moment. Just with regards to my session next week, inshallah, we'll be continuing with some of the strategies post-lockdown. And again, inshallah, we'll have a bit more time for Q&A then as well, inshallah.
Just my question now, this is to our guests, so that's for Sister Zainab, Ustadha Nabeela. Either one can answer first. So in regards to Masjid Ibrahim, could you tell us a bit more about the masjid in general, because it's a local masjid, and there's a madrasa that's also held inside the masjid. So just tell us about whether you have a Senko, if you have a special needs department, how it looks like, how it was started, what's the structure, how it's working. What are you doing about post-lockdown? I understand Ustadha Nabeela mentioned that the first thing she mentioned to some members of the committee or the leadership, that she would like to be there at the table when all this is being discussed in terms of returning back to some form of normality. So just let us know about the history of Masjid, and also just let us know where it is. Tell us more about it in those terms. Whoever wants to answer.
Yeah, sure, inshallah. Masjid Ibrahim, it's based in Plaistow, and it's in it's on Barking Road. It's been I'm not sure how long the masjid's been there for, but I know that as a young child as well, I used to attend the masjid quite regularly there, sort of because it held a lot of youth classes. So they run classes for children aged sort of 5 upwards, all the way to like and teenagers as well. They hold sort of toddler groups, parenting circles, as well as coffee mornings with cancer research as well. So they're sort of quite involved with the community work over there. In regards to SEN, well, SEN was a project that literally came about in 2019 October. So it was one of the head of the Masjid Ibrahim committee. His name is Brother Asim. He was the one. So he attended a program for autism in another masjid in Finsbury Park, and he was just like, oh, I can't believe that there's nothing there for autistic children within our community. And so he held sort of a meeting with me, and then he was like, can we gather volunteers, and I would really like to sort of start up this project. And it just sort of kicked off from there, and we managed to sort of form a team, and we just try to provide a service to a community every Saturday for autistic children only. So we've got about 25 children who come. We've sort of split our groups into sort of 3 sections, so with sort of according to their needs. So non-verbal, high functioning, behavioral, sort of we've sort of categorized them, and we do sort of learning according to their needs. We try and provide sort of Islamic teachings. I mean, that's mostly sort of like certain types of attitudes that we need to have, a behavior that we need to carry, learning the qaida, Quran, social stories, but that's sort of linking it to the stories of the Prophet as well. So we don't actually have a SENCO. So I'm just the project coordinator. We've got special speech and language therapists who work with us, and other members of staff who also work in school and have background with SEN. So that's how we're sort of collaborating right now in terms of project. We are looking to sort of grow and have people who have more knowledge than me in regards to SEN to sort of help boost this project and reach out to more and to the wider community as well, with sort of more upcoming projects, inshallah.
Yeah, Jazakallah for that, Ustadha Nabeela. And that's great to hear. And I think these positive stories are very important, that there are things that are taking place. There is effort being made in terms of being more inclusive, especially for our special needs or children with special needs. So that's great. And inshallah, if there's anyone else who's listening and who's attending at the moment, if you know of any other local maktab, do give us their names. Let us know what they're doing. And maybe at some point, the Masajid can start collaborating on this. And we don't need any external help, but just if we pull our resources together just between the communities, that is sufficient in itself, and that will make us stronger, inshallah, as we go forward. Back over to you, Ustadh Danyaal.
Just a note on that, actually, Admin Islamic Studies Resources said that the SEN page link includes 17 provisions in the UK catering exclusively or inclusively for 10 children for Quran, Islamic studies, etc. So yeah, absolutely right, that there is an effort being made to sort of have a coordinated approach within the Muslim community to sort of target SEN really and truly. Okay. Have we got any other questions or comments from any other parents or contributors? Before we wrap up?
Not yet. So if anyone has any questions about anything that was said, any of the strategies, anything to do with that, maybe anything unrelated to COVID-19, just special needs in general, please do ask away. We're just going to wait another couple of minutes for your questions. If more questions come in, we'll continue to stay on. Otherwise, we will bring this session to an end. And then, inshallah, Ustadh Danyaal's session will be held. Is it next Monday, Ustadh Danyaal?
Yeah, next Monday, inshallah.
Yes.
And then inshallah at the end, again, we'll do a similar sort of thing, and Ustadha Nabeela and Sister Zainab will be at the end again for Q&A, inshallah. So
brilliant. Okay, yeah, so if we have any more questions, please bring them forward, and we'd be happy to take them. Just checking my phone to see if anyone sent a separate message. Some people do send messages separately as well. Nope, it's still clear at the moment.
And of course, if people are watching this and they watch it back later, they might think of questions afterwards. So please do send it to Ustadh Hamid, and we can try and answer it perhaps potentially in the next webinar, inshallah.
Yep, absolutely. So the way you could do that is if you just put the question down on YouTube directly on the comment section, I will receive that, and I will inshallah get that ready for our next session, inshallah. Okay, is there anything else, Ustadh Danyaal, you'd like to add to conclude on today's session? Conclude, inshallah.
Not for me. It's just again, jazakallah khair to Sister Zainab and Ustadh Nabeela for giving up their time for us. Because mashallah, it takes a lot of effort to put together this PowerPoint presentation and to coordinate. So jazakallah khair for that. And again, jazakallah khair for giving up time for next week as well. So jazakallah khair for that again.
Now, Jazakallah khairan for the opportunity and allowing us sort of to come on your platform and to sort of voice this. I think it's really good, and it's really nice to see that, you know, schools are taking interest in the SEN projects, and, you know, to sort of branch out, and, you know, inshallah, we'll always be on board with, you know, sort of collecting resources and building and stuff as well, inshallah. So always count us in.
Inshallah, jazakallah for that. That's great. And likewise, if there's anyone else from other local maktabs, organizations, if you need to come together at some point, more than happy to do that as well, inshallah. Okay, so I think there's no more questions coming through. So from us, so for myself and our Madam Fatima Elizabeth from Tistory, I would like to thank firstly Ustadha Nabeela, Sister Zainab, just like Ustadh Danyaal said, for giving up their time putting together this presentation. And obviously this presentation is not theoretical, it's pretty much experiential. They've experienced this and then put this together for us. So if you can benefit, please do so, make dua as well. But most importantly, spread the news, spread the information, because you know, and especially in terms and context of the madrasas, because I think we've kind of neglected children with special needs for far too long. The awareness has not been there. So please do create the awareness for our children, because they are our children, they are our future, and we need them to love Islam. And one of the ways to, you know, cater for this love of Islam is through creating awareness about children with special needs, because you don't know which one of them will take the flag of Islam forward, as is said. So jazakallah for that, Ustadha Nabeela, Ustadha Zainab, and also Ustadh Danyaal for getting us in touch and putting this together for us as well. Jazakallahu khairan, everyone, and jazakallahu khairan for everyone who's joined us online live and those who are watching later on as well. From us, subhanallah bihamdi, subhanakallahumma bihamdik, ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.